Okay, we're graphing that function. Let me write it a little bit bigger here. Y equals minus 2 cosine 2 pi x plus 3 pi. Okay, so how do we got to figure out which of these four, A, B, C, or D, is the right graph. How are we going to do that? How do we know which of those four is the right graph? Well, let's use the fact of the period and the phase shift. So remember what we do for this. The period is 2 pi over b. This is A here, B here, and C here. So in the formula, 2 pi over b, that's 2 pi over 2 pi. The period is 1 for this cosine function. And the phase shift is negative c over b. So negative c, 3 pi over b, which is 2 pi. So the pi's cancel. That's negative 3 divided by 2, which is negative 1.5. So the phase shift is negative 1.5. So that's where the function starts. It starts one cycle at the phase shift. Remember, that's what the phase shift is. It's where the start of one cycle is. And then it's going to end that first cycle. Where's it going to end the first cycle? You take the starting point plus the period, because period is the width. This is the width of one cycle, right? That's what period means, right? The period of something. It's its cycle. It's the width of its cycle. So the start is negative 1.5 right there. The period is 1 right here. So you add those up, you get negative 0.5. So that means this thing's going to start at negative 1.5 and end at negative 0.5, one cycle. And what is one cycle of the cosine? What does it look like if I was to draw it down here? What does one cycle of the cosine look like? Well, cosine starts his cycle high, goes low, goes back high again, doesn't he? That's what cosine does. We're talking about cosine on this one. So that's what cosine does. So, okay, so he's going to start that at negative 1.5. So I'm going to come up to the graph, and I'm looking here. Negative 1.5. Now, where's that? We got all these pi's over 4s and pi's over 2s and weird stuff. How do you start at negative 1.5? Well, think about what negative 1.5 is. Think about what pi is. How about that? This is, let me make this a little bigger for us. This is negative pi over 2. What's pi? It's about 3.14, isn't it? So that's negative 3.14 over 2, or let's just say negative 3 over 2. That's about negative 1.5, isn't it? Right? Because remember, pi is about 3.14. So pi over 2 is half of $3. Half of $3 is $1.50. So this is about, let me erase some of this now. This is about minus 1.5, and this is about positive 1.5, because it's half a pi, half of 3. Half of $3 is $1.50. So when we say that our cosine starts at negative 1.5, that means it's going to start back here at negative 1.5. And it's going to go low and go high and finish. Where does it finish? It ends its first cycle at negative 0.5. So where's that? Well, this is, by the way, this is 3 over 4, pi over 4, which is 0.75. So it's going to end at 0.5. That's somewhere back around here. Right? That's somewhere before 0.7. If this is 0.75, then 0.5 is somewhere back here. So it's going to start here at negative 1.5, go low, go high, and come back, and have done one cycle of cosine between negative 1.5 and negative 0.5. But hold on, This cosine is upside down. That negative right there, that's going to make it upside down. So it's going to start low, go high. And the 2 means 2 is how high and low it goes. So let's get this together a little bit better. So putting that all together then, we're saying at negative 2 here and at negative 1.5 it starts off. And then 0.5 would be about here. It'd be right back about there. So in between, it's going to go up to 2 in between in the middle. It's going to go low, go high, go back to low. It's going to look something like that, isn't it? Do you see how I'm coming up with that? Again, it's because I did the period and the phase shift, right? The period is 1. The phase shift is negative 1.5, which is where it starts. It starts at negative 1.5. And then you add the period and you get negative 0.5. So that's the ending point. That's where it ends one cycle, ends its first cycle. Where it starts plus the width of one cycle. Phase shift plus one cycle. Okay, so that means it starts at negative 1.5, which is pi over 2, ends at negative 0.5, which would be about there. And so that's what it looks like. Okay, let's go look at which one of those does something like that. So at negative pi over 2, here's negative pi over 2. It should be at the bottom. This one's at the top at negative pi over 2. That's crazy. This one at negative pi over 2 is at the bottom. That's good. But look, it does one cycle, gets to the other side. We're saying it's going to do a whole cycle on the left side. No way for A, no way for B. How about C? Well, negative pi over 2, it kind of starts in the middle. It doesn't look right. Here, negative pi over 2 starts at the bottom, goes high, goes low. Look at that. There's a whole cycle. That's our answer, isn't it? Before it even gets to the middle. That's what we're doing, a whole cycle before it even gets to the middle. So the answer is clearly D after doing all that work.